You know what to do. You even want to do it. But when it's time to execute, you freeze, you scroll, and you end up wasting the most valuable resource you have, your time. This doesn't mean you're broken, doesn't mean you're undisciplined or lazy. It means that you are losing the battle against a formidable enemy that defeats 98% of founders. And this enemy is called psychic friction. And until you remove it, you'll keep sabotaging your own success. I've been there and I've helped 300 founders defeat it. And if you want to scale without wasting time getting overwhelmed or burnout, you have to watch this video. Let's first start by addressing the elephant in the room. Most productivity advice does not work because it does not go deep enough to resolve the root cause of a lack of productivity, which is that psychic friction. A friction that affects every single entrepreneur. Even when you reach your next level of success, you still find yourself procrastinating, drifting, or self-sabotaging on a different set of tasks. At every moment in business, there's things you know you need to do you're not doing because you haven't yet resolved the friction around it. And most entrepreneurs try to discipline themselves through that friction. They out-hustle their distraction, which may work in the short term at the expense of your nervous system, but it will never work in the long term because it does not solve the root problem, which is the fact that right now your subconscious mind is pulling you in 10 different directions. Part of it wants success, part of it fears judgment, part of it wants to lie on the beach. This part are at odds among themselves, creating this friction that needs to be resolved for you to actually succeed. Have you ever noticed how you can work 10 hours and still avoid the 2 things that you know will grow the business? Trying to get stuff done without removing these frictions like driving one foot on the gas and the other on the brake. It won't get you far and you will suffer unnecessarily. You'll lose energy, you get stuck, you'll spin your wheels, and you even think about quitting. The solution is not to hustle harder, but instead remove this friction on the root. Until you do it, no system, SOP, or team member will help you. Now, what happens if you do not fix it? Well, every entrepreneur knows this feeling of hitting 5, 6, 7, even 8 figures and then staying stuck, hitting that mental ceiling created by the subconscious. And most people will tell you to just push harder, but that only leads to burnout. Or they'll tell you to hire people to do the work you don't want to do so you can be in your zone of genius, but that creates a bloated business that doesn't scale. Or switch offer, which only leads to shiny object syndrome. Or hire agencies, only to find yourself hostage by them. Elite founders understand that there's no other solution than mastery, consistently learning the things they need to do and removing that friction at the root. The problem is that every time you don't do what you know you need to do, you are rewiring your mind in the wrong direction to consistently avoid the thing you know you need to do. Every time you avoid, for instance, sales calls, you reinforce anxiety pathways. Every time you choose short-term fixes instead of long-term solutions, you are rewiring your mind for instant gratification. The key is not to force your productivity, like most people will tell you, is to delete this resistance, is to rewire your nervous system so you can start craving the very activities that you currently avoid. Most people really try to scale with a broken foundation, which is why it doesn't work. The first step that you have to do at every single time you find yourself stuck is to ask yourself what subconscious patterns are creating the resistance that you are now dealing with. What are the identity conflicts and the unmet emotional needs related to the task that are keeping you stuck? This is what every elite performer does. Every elite athlete, elite founder, elite CEO is to work on the game, to work on their minds to consistently show up at peak performance. Once you can free that energy that was once trapped in negative patterns and you redirect it to the high leverage action you know you need to do, you start actually craving the progress that results. Think of your subconscious as an operating system. If you have 17 tabs open, fear, perfectionism, self-doubt, craving approval, your conscious mind will always lose. But if you close those tabs, eliminate the entropy, and go directly towards the task, you will rewire your mind. That's when discipline becomes instinctual. That's when deep work becomes natural. That is when flow states become a daily occurrence, not a once in a while miracle. I've been coaching founders for 8 years at this point, and let me tell you, my goal is not to make them productive, but to make sure they rewire their mind to start craving the hard things. And when you start craving the hard things, you start making the right calls. You do deep strategy work. You do behaviors that results in million, because you finally associate your nervous system to understand friction as the necessary precondition for the reward you want. Nothing worthwhile comes easy. But if you choose hard and you just associate hard with winning, you will inevitably start winning. And as soon as I realized that in my past life, when I used to be a venture capitalist investor, I still am, but more active, I realized that this was the killer app in business. It wasn't about habit stacking, productivity, strategy, or some random stuff that most executive coaches focus on. It's about deep subconscious re-engineering. It's about finding the mental friction, removing the internal blockers, and rebuilding every entrepreneur's mind for deep focus, clarity, and execution. And over the past 7 years to 8 years, I've helped guys to double, triple, even 10x their revenue within 3 to 4 months, not because we deployed some magic trick or some hack in marketing or sales or a specific type of funnel, no, because they rewire their mind to seek doing the hard thing, so much so that they could not help but actually do the thing they previously avoided. And guess what typically happens when you do that? You get results you never got before. Because when you're not longer in conflict with yourself and you naturally choose to work hard on what matters, exponential results follow. In fact, I recall an Australian web designer client of mine was making about 16K a month, and he wanted to absolutely get to 30K a month. He was doing about 60 hours a week. It turns out that about 10 to 15 of those hours were actually YouTube viewing that he labeled as research. And he hadn't done any outreach for months. In fact, he actually dreaded outreach. And he didn't like sales calls either. So we rewired that root pattern in 6 weeks, and guess what happened? Revenue didn't jump to 30K. It jumped to 50K, and he was working much less, right? About 45 hours. What this tells you is that if you work at the root core of every lack of execution, you start finding the ability to do the things that you know are going to help you scale yourself and your business. I recall another client who had been procrastinating for 4 years to start his own business. He was very good at marketing sales, but he never dared to start. As soon as we removed that mental friction, guess what happened? Within 4 weeks, he had a business. Within 7 months, the business was making 100K a month, right? That's not typical, but that proves how important it is to remove psychic friction. Realize that in business, you're always dealing with a variation of psychic friction. There are always things you don't want to do, and most of the things you don't want to do are actually useful for you. If you're stuck at 10, 20, 30, 50K a month, you right now in your head have the solution to get to the next level. You're never lacking a marketing hack or a sales hack or whatever. What you lack is the ability to execute on what matters, to think clearly and execute relentlessly. And if you truly want to become elite at this, which is the most important thing in business, bar none, download the Neuro Execution Protocol below. It will show you our system to consistently get folks from 10, 20, 30K a month to 50, 60, 70, 100K a month within just a few months. Not by working harder, but by working less, but with higher leverage, by rewiring their mind to consistently do the things they know they need to do. See you in the next video.